Welcome to meeting number 44 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to the order of reference of May 10th, 2022, the committee is meeting on Bill C-19, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on April 7th, 2022, and other measures. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and are remotely using the Zoom application. Per the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on March 10th, 2022, all those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who are at their place during proceedings. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. I would now like to welcome today's witnesses from the Finance Department. Please note that today's witnesses are here to speak about parts 5. Is this in your? Okay. Yep. So now welcoming today's witnesses as an individual, we have James Hinton, intellectual property and innovation expert from Own Innovation. From the Canada's Building Trades Unions, we have Sean Strickland, Executive Director, Rita Ramadi, Government Relations Specialist. From Canadians for Tax Fairness, D.T. Cochrane, Economist. From Cider Canada, we have Barry Rook, Executive Director. From Imagine Canada, we have Bruce McDonald, President and Chief Executive Officer. We'll now begin with Mr. Hinton from Own Innovation for his opening remarks for up to 5 minutes, please.
Great. Good morning. I am Jim Hinton, IP lawyer, patent agent, and trademark agent with Own Innovation. I'm the co-founder of the Innovation Asset Collective, a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance and Innovation, and an assistant professor at Western University. I'm not speaking to you in my capacity in those roles. I'm speaking to you as an individual with experience helping Canadian companies navigate the often predatory global IP systems so that they can commercialize and scale their technologies globally. I'm pleased to speak to Budget 2022, which has been called an innovation budget. There are many great aspects to this budget, including IP strategy investments and other innovation funding programs. But unless we position these programs properly, they will be nothing but empty calories. They taste good going down, but will have nothing to show for it when it matters. Two key things to consider when this budget are the importance of IP, intellectual property, and data assets, and how that impacts a company's freedom to operate. Intangible assets, including IP and data, represent the most valuable corporate assets today, with 91% of the S&P 500 market value being intangible assets. So IP and data aren't everything, but they're almost everything. With this budget, we've recognized that Canada will have a last place in innovation in the OECD with dismal business investment in R&D. This will continue despite our current trajectory and billions in new innovation funding unless we properly orient. So why do Canadian companies do so poorly and not invest in R&D? Quite simply, it's because they do not have the freedom to operate as global markets are already owned by existing players who control IP and data stocks. So where does Canada stand? It's terrible. We own less than 1% of the world's intellectual property. So for Canadian companies, that means because we don't own the IP, we do not have the freedom to operate because you can't commercialize what you don't own. So we have to manage the 99% IP positions of global players that limit Canadian companies' freedom to operate. Practically speaking, that means Canadians don't have the proprietary data sets or own the foundational patents that are needed to practice to commercialize globally, for example. So turning to the current budget, there's a buffet of funding innovation programs, a growth fund, new innovation agency, overhauling SR&ED, critical mineral strategy, clean tech program, semiconductors, strategic innovation fund, federal granting council, superclusters, copyright extension, digital currency, economic council, patent box, competition reform, strategic procurement, and even IP law clinics. But to get innovation, you have to have a proper frame of success. So what is innovation success? It's Canadian companies owning valuable IP and data stocks and commercializing their technology globally and at scale. So the proper frame is one of freedom to operate. Will this program increase or decrease the freedom to operate of Canadian companies? What is the net economic benefit? To do this, we need to recognize Canada's current IP position with the global IP landscape and ensure that these programs structurally improve the global IP and data positions of Canadian companies as against their global competitors. This must be the lens that Canadian innovation policy views any innovation funding. And remember, nearly all economic activity, over 91%, is innovation activity. In a particular example of how poorly we've been doing, over 10 billion in annual public funding that goes to Canadian universities, more than half of the resultant industry IP ends up being owned by foreign companies. This means that currently Canadian universities are actually working to reduce the freedom to operate of Canadian companies. We would be better off if Canadian universities did nothing at all in the name of innovation. This permeates through our misoriented innovation funding. There are consistent examples from artificial intelligence to mining, critical minerals to electric vehicles. These challenges are why I co-founded the Innovation Asset Collective to increase the freedom to operate of Canadian companies. In less than 2 years, the IAC has been a standout of successful innovation action by making significant impact in meaningfully improving the freedom to operate and IP positions of Canadian companies through IP education, generation, and patent collectives. However, I was disappointed to see that IAC was not funded in this budget to keep Canada pace with its global peers. Full funding means an order of magnitude more than the 30 million pilot. Looking to global peers, the French Patent Fund initially received 500 million euros and has since received 500 million euros more. We need to be doing this at scale to be complete globally. To close, things will get worse for Canada and we must act with tremendous urgency. The Americans and Chinese are internally well coordinated in controlling their domestic markets, with the Japanese, Koreans, and Europeans aggressively working to maintain and expand their IP and data positions. And here in Canada, Canada's IP stocks dwindle, with two of Canada's major strategic IP holders, BlackBerry and Wyland, selling off their IP portfolios. And all the while we continue to invest in growing the IP positions of foreign companies like Huawei and Google. So despite progress, without proper orientation and increased pace of action, we will most certainly be last in the OECD countries. This will mean that Canada won't be able to enjoy the fruits of a productive economy, great healthcare, and other social programs that form the bedrock of Canadian prosperity. And if we're last in the OECD, then it won't be long until Canada quickly becomes a middle-income country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hinton. Now we'll move to the Canada's Building Trades Unions, and for 5 minutes of remarks, please.
Good morning, Chair Fonseca and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to take part in the pre-budget consultations earlier this year and for the invitation to appear today. My name is Sean Strickland, Executive Director of Canada's Building Trades Unions, part of North America's Building Trades Unions. Unfortunately, my colleague, Ms. Rita Ramadi, will not be able to join us today. Canada's Building Trades Unions, we represent 14 international construction unions with a combined membership of over 3 million unionized construction workers in North America and 600,000 here in Canada. The women and men of the building trades are employed constructing everything from small projects through to large multi-billion-dollar projects right across Canada. The construction and maintenance sector combined annually represents approximately 6% of Canada's GDP. Budget 2022 included important wins for work, including the historic win for Canada's construction. The building trades have been advocating for a long time. This proposal will now be able to deduct those expenses from their income, something they previously could not do under the Income Tax Act. This will make it easier for construction workers to go where the work
Mr. Strickland, I think we're having some
still support
yeah,
their
Mr. Strickland,
back home.
Mr. Strickland, can you hear me?
The Finance Committee for including the amendment.
Mr. Strickland?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So we're having, your internet's a little bit choppy.
I can hear you.
What we request is that you may have to just turn off your video. This is a televised meeting, but you may have to turn off your video so that we can hear you clearly for your remarks, and we'll see how that goes. We've actually just lost you. Are you still there?
Yeah, I just turned the video off.
Okay,
Mr.
yeah, if you
Chairman.
turn the video off, and then if you can continue with your remarks, we'd appreciate that. See if it comes through clear.
Okay, so you want me to take it from the top, or did you get most of the?
Well, I got you at about a
directory?
minute and a half, so that's where I kind of stopped the time.
Okay, so why don't I just start it off with budget 2022?
Sure, that'd be
And
great.
just ask for some leeway with the time, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The budget 2022 included some important wins for workers, one of which is something we've been working on for a long time, the labor mobility tax deduction for tradespeople. With this proposal, tradespeople that have to travel far from home will now be able to deduct those expenses from their income, something they previously could not do under the Income Tax Act. This will make it easier for workers to go where the work is and still support their family back home. I want to thank the Finance Committee for including this in your pre-budget report and recommendations. The budget included other wins for workers and Canadians, doubling the funding for the Union Training and Innovation Program, a program that has allowed training centers and organizations to expand, innovate, and improve training for skilled tradespeople, including projects like the Office to Advance Women Apprentices that is focused on offering wraparound support services to increase the recruitment and retention of women in the skilled trades. Investments in new home builds, and funding for research investments into green technologies like small modular reactors. An investment tax credit for carbon capture, storage, and utilization, which is really important on our move to a net zero-based economy. Investments in childcare, healthcare, and a national pharmacare program. And a new union-led advisory table that brings together unions and trade associations that will advise the government on priority investments to help workers navigate the changing labor market with a particular focus on skilled mid-career workers in at-risk sectors and jobs. These are just a few of the highlights that benefit workers and benefit Canadians included in Budget 2022. As we look beyond Budget 2022, CBTU urges the government to focus on reforms to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program as part of the short-term solution to labor availability, where unions are able, making them a designated employer for the Temporary Foreign Worker Program to ensure workers are treated fairly. Unions can leverage our hiring hall systems to put temporary foreign workers to work with different employers, better addressing labor availability, and also including building trades and local building trades councils when you're making an assessment on the viability of a temporary foreign worker program in any particular area in Canada. Changes to employment insurance, make the temporary change around allocation of separation monies permanent, allow apprentices to apply for EI in advance of their training, which would provide better financial security to update their skills. And when reestablishing the Board of Appeals, ensure that there is a designated labor representation on that tribunal. One other issue that I think we could look at going forward to address labor shortages is address and ease cross-border mobility for skilled trades workers between Canada and the US. Through our 197 training halls across North America, we know that training qualifications for many of our trades are near identical on both sides of the border. Therefore, it just makes sense to allow workers to travel back and forth to address labor shortages that is very difficult to do. In conclusion, as parliamentarians, you know that there is always more work to be done. And on behalf of our 600,000 unionized construction workers, we thank you for your service and encourage you to pass the budget to the benefit of not only our members, but all construction workers in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. We were able to hear you clearly once the video was off. I'm not sure if you'll be able to turn it on after to see if we'll be able to see you when you make further remarks or answer questions. We're moving to the Canadians for Tax Fairness. D.T. Cochrane for up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Let me get my speaking notes up. Thank you kindly for having Canadians for Tax Fairness comment on this budget implementation bill. Let me begin by commending the government for acting with the appropriate urgency to create a publicly accessible beneficial ownership registry. The need for this registry is acknowledged by members of all parties. Efforts must now be turned to getting the provinces on board so the registry is truly pan-Canadian. To that end, we recommend the government fully fund the endeavor. Further, implementation should move ahead with all willing partners, and any laggards can be later enrolled. There are several other components of Bill C-19 that C4TF will happily address during the Q&A, particularly the luxury goods tax, the measures on housing speculation, the home accessibility tax credit, and the tax measures for climate action. However, today I want to address things missing from the bill. The one-time and ongoing surtaxes on the profits of banks and insurance companies, plus an updated general anti-avoidance rule to crack down on tax avoidance. We understand that these measures might require more consultation. However, we are concerned there is a lack of urgency. Too much time allows for too much influence by well-resourced elites and their agents, leading to weakened, if not ineffective, measures. During the pandemic, the government provided unprecedented amounts of money to support Canadians and stabilize our financial system. Unfortunately, deficit Chicken Littles are now misleading Canadians by claiming these supports are responsible for inflation. The standard inflation story claims it is from, quote, too much money chasing too few goods. But there is a much simpler explanation. Corporations are using their price-making power. This is not to discount significant external forces disrupting global supply chains and causing many costs to rise. However, our research found that the 2021 profit margin of Canada's publicly listed corporations almost doubled to nearly 16% from a pre-pandemic average of less than 9%. This strongly suggests corporations are doing more than just passing along higher costs. We have a trickle-up economy. That means some of the public money added to the economy inevitably found its way into corporate coffers. With corporations also boosting their profit margins, an ever larger flow of public money ended up under corporate control. This overwhelmingly benefits the elite owners. C4TF welcomes the surtaxes on banks and insurance companies. However, they are too narrow in application, set too high a threshold, and are too low. While finance companies have seen the largest jump in profit margins, going from 14% to 22%, extraordinary profits are seen across many sectors. There is no good reason to limit the one-time tax to incomes above $1 billion or the ongoing rate increase to income above $100 million. Also, a one-time extra 15% and the ongoing additional 1.5% are timidly low. Successive governments have been cutting the corporate income tax rate for decades. From almost 40% in the 1980s, the current rate is a meager 15%. We were promised the cuts would result in more productive investment. In fact, investment out of corporate profits is lower now than it was in the 1980s. Of course, corporations don't actually pay taxes at the statutory rate. In 2021, even while they were making record high profits, corporations were pushing their effective tax rates to record lows. They create and exploit loopholes to lower their taxes. We were pleased to see Budget 2022 included plans to close some of these loopholes. We also welcomed more concrete steps towards strengthening the General Anti-Avoidance Rule, also known as GAR, which will empower the Canada Revenue Agency to crack down more forcefully on creative corporate accounting. But this process needs to be given greater urgency. Currently, the deck is heavily stacked against the CRA and its efforts to deal with tax avoidance by the largest corporations and wealthiest individuals. Recent decisions by the Supreme Court against the CRA highlight the fact that the agency is working with one hand tied behind its back. We need an updated GAR ASAP. When the pandemic struck, it was widely accepted that we needed our public institutions to support Canadians. Corporations and their owners have nonetheless profited handsomely. the need for robust investment in public programs only grows. A stronger excess profits tax, a higher corporate income tax rate, and stronger GAR can reduce the excessive benefit going to corporations and help create a more just, equitable country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cochrane. And now we'll hear from Cider Canada, Barry Rook.
Thank you for having me present to the committee today. My name is Barry Rook. I'm the Executive Director of the new National Cider Association, Cider Canada, CIDRA Canada. We support 370 licensed cider makers across the country and just reached our first year as a nonprofit last month. Although the association is new, cider has been produced in Canada for hundreds of years, making a resurgence over the last half-decade. We believe the number of cider producers has doubled in the last 5 years across Canada. The sector directly supports close to 9,000 jobs and tens of thousands of others in orchards, transportation, and restaurants. Cider producers come in many different forms: small fruit-to-table producers who do everything, like Riverdale Orchard and Cidery in Bonshaw at PEI, community-focused small businesses like Coronation Hall Cider Mills in Bristol, Quebec, destination cideries like Taves Estate Cidery in Abbotsford, BC, and large commercially driven products that service the entire country, like Growers, No Boats on Sunday, and Thornberry Craft Cider Company. In Ontario, we believe that close to 8% of all apples are used for cider, with the numbers in Quebec, BC, and Nova Scotia at similar or even higher levels, much of these using apples that would not be used otherwise because of their appearance. It is also an important alternative to beer for those who are gluten intolerant and don't want the high alcohol levels of wine. Our biggest concern is related to the incoming excise duty. This is expected to increase the cost of a can or a bottle by 20 to 50 cents. This cost has to be borne by the producers or passed on to the consumers for at least 6 months before the proposed producers program provides some relief. With production costs rising, transportation costs further increasing, and new cash flow issues, cider producers are struggling to compete with international products, price points that are drastically inferior to Canadian beverages, and see money leave the country. This would be very bad for Canada's largest fruit-producing sector. The proposed support program appears to be short by $25 to $35 million a year and is only set to last till 2024. We need to have a fully funded program as the sector's consumer base is really starting to grow. We have the resources to be one of the largest producers of this product in the world. Having the added cost will stifle growth as it puts in doubt the producers and leaves the sector unsure whether to invest in the Canadian economy. We could see close to half of cider producers in Canada close the doors within the next 3 years, with an estimated economic impact of $500 million annually. Production of cider is slightly different than our counterparts in the wine industry, where cider is classified. Production costs for cider are typically higher than wine, but it's consumed more like a beer. Apples can travel better, but are stored for a longer time, which makes production able to happen year-round. This means that importing juice, which is not overly common, could be a solution to reduce costs at the impact of the local economy. Without a fully funded program, large commercial cideries will have no incentive to buy Canadian apples and may turn to imports. This also encourages medium companies who use groups like BC Tree Fruits to co-pack or co-produce a product to look for juice externally and further hurt the Canadian apple industry. I'll finish my time with some great news about the sector. We are becoming known worldwide as cider producers in Canada are winning awards at a disappropriate amount. We are really, really good makers of cider with Canadian apples. Thank you again for the opportunity to share the information about what used to be one of the largest industries in Canada pre-Prohibition era, now seeing faster growth than the craft beer industry did from 20 to 10 years ago. Now's the time to invest in the sector. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rook. We'll now move to Imagine Canada and Bruce McDonald for up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to bring important considerations to your attention as you discuss the first Budget Implementation Act. As you're all aware, the charitable and nonprofit sector is a vital part of the very fabric of our communities, improving the lives of everyday people here in Canada and working with others around the world. In addition, the sector contributes to the nation's economic well-being. Charities and nonprofit organizations employ 1 in 10 Canadians and contribute 8.3% to Canada's GDP. As a sector that is of significant importance to supporting Canadians, we were encouraged by 2 recent announcements in Budget 2022. The changes to the disbursement quota and the stated intent to amend the Income Tax Act to allow a charity to provide its resources to organizations that are not qualified donees. It was stated that this would implement the spirit of Bill S-216. In combination, these measures would infuse the sector with additional financial resources and allow for more of those new resources to support vulnerable and marginalized communities, including working with organizations often serving and led by Black Canadians, Indigenous people, and persons of color. I'm here today to let you know that the proposed language in the Budget Implementation Act has significantly missed the mark and would in fact make things worse for charities wanting to work with non-qualified donees. While the intent is clear, the specific language is hugely problematic. The spirit of Bill S-216 includes a number of critical elements. It is a made-in-Canada policy solution that reflects our international commitments and integrates the latest evidence-based accountability and trust-based philanthropic principles. Unfortunately, the specific language of the BIA instead offers a rigid and ill-suited integration of U.S. tax measures into Canada's ITA. We continue to encourage the government to support the spirit and substance of S-216 and a wide collective of organizations, including Cooperation Canada, Philanthropic Foundations Canada, Imagine Canada, and a group of the nation's leading charity lawyers are offering concrete solutions to improve the legislation. If not amended, BIA C-19 will have a number of harmful effects. Rather than removing the concept of direction and control, the BIA retains the current own activities regime, which requires direction and control. The BIA language then actually codifies direction and control through regulations and makes it part of the fabric of the new qualifying disbursements regime. In practice, casting existing CRA administrative guidance into legislation will result in a less flexible approach, and CRA will require more direction and control-like conditions than before for qualifying disbursements. This will result in fewer types of collaborations, less flexibility in their design, and fewer partnerships with non-qualified donees overall. The proposed language does not reflect the spirit of Bill S-216, which is trust-based philanthropy on equal footing, but instead perpetuates the current paternalistic regime by embedding a long and overly prescriptive code-like list of requirements that would govern the relationship between funder and grantee. By doing so, the BIA retains the colonial parent-child nature of the relationship that we were trying to get away from. The BIA reinforces and in fact enhances the administrative burden, and organizations will have to incur legal fees, hire lawyers, and control actions to abide by these regulations. In order to encompass the spirit of Bill S-216, amendments to the language of the BIA for consideration. In section 149.11, we would propose to refine the definition of qualifying disbursement, remove the reference to the disbursement meeting prescribed conditions, and replace it with the requirement that the charity instead take reasonable steps to ensure that the resources dispersed are used exclusively in furtherance of a charitable purpose. This would allow for more inclusive partnerships to better support non-qualified donees providing programs while retaining accountability and further charitable purpose. In subsection 21, amend the proposed language in paragraph 168(1)(f) of the Act related to directed giving. I won't read the full amendment, but will say that the amendment provides a solution to the directed giving issue in the BIA. The problem with the language isn't that charities can't grant to non-qualified donees, it's that they cannot receive gifts for the specific purpose of giving it to non-qualified donees, even if this aligns with their charitable activities. The third, delete proposed Regulation 3703 in its entirety. This would allow for the regulations to move back into CRA guidance documents and not exist as codified rules in the Income Tax Act. The language of the BIA has yet to be finalized. As members of the Finance Committee, as members of Parliament, and as the voices of your communities, you can have an enormous influence on the final wording, and I urge you to use that influence and to support these amendments. By doing so, you will establish a system that's more respectful, less complex, less costly, and can adapt to the needs of the future. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. McDonald. And now we will have questions from members. Our first round, each of the parties have up to 6 minutes to ask questions of witnesses. We are starting with the Conservatives, and I believe it's MP Lewis up for 6 minutes. MP Lewis.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and it's an honor to be here at Finance Committee for the first time. So excited to be here, and thank you to all the witnesses for your testimony. I think it was fantastic. Mr. Chair, through you, all of my questions will be to Mr. Strickland this morning, and so I would start off, Mr. Strickland, just with a quick comment. So thank you for the work that you do through the Canadian Building Trades Union. And, you know, as you're very well aware, I've been working incredibly closely with a lot of the various unions, the carpenters unions, the construction laborers unions, the IBEW, LIUNA. And I believe you're aware, sir, of my private member's bill, Bill C-241. Are you aware of that bill, sir?
Yes, I am, MP Lewis.
Okay, thank you very much. So to build off of your testimony, you know, you had mentioned about 3 million workers in North America that's represented. And I do believe it to be true that another 350,000 skilled trades workers will be needed by 2025 in Ontario alone. And so in and through the introduction of Bill C-241, I'm a really big believer that if we're going to build Canada back, if we're going to build our bridges and build our sewers and build our electrical systems and build the homes that we all agree that we all desperately need, we have to get skilled trades and get skilled trades moving. And so in and through Bill C-19, there was an introduction from the government, and you know, it's a great start, but it has a cap of $4,000. And that tax deduction of $4,000, you know, could equate to a month and a half or 2 months of travel. And under C-241, my private member's bill, it would actually, there's no cap to it, because I believe if we are going to have our skilled trades moving to various areas across the country, I believe that they should not have any restrictions. As a business person myself, there's no restrictions as to how many times I can get on an airplane or stay in a hotel or have a meal out of town. So I'm just curious, sir, could you just expand, like how exactly do you think this would be more beneficial perhaps to the legislation in Bill C-19?
Well, thank you very much for the question, MP Lewis, and thanks very much for your advocacy and the sponsorship of the private member's bill. And as I mentioned in my remarks, we've been advocating for a tax deduction at Canada's building trades unions for a long time. And previously, there's been 3 private members' bills sponsored by the NDP. And the recommendation that came from this finance committee was for a tax deduction, which I believe was received the majority of support from the finance committee. So our position is that our workers need tax relief now, and the quickest way to get that through, I believe, is through what is contained in the budget. However, our job at Canada's building trades unions is to support what policy and legislative initiatives benefit our members, and so we're supportive of legislation that delivers the greatest benefit in fairness. We're not asking for anything, you know, that's unfair compared to other taxpayers, but we support initiatives and legislation that benefits Canadian construction workers, including the 600,000 members of Canada's building trades unions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Through you, Mr. Chair, back through to Mr. Strickland. You had touched upon cross-border mobility. And ironically, in my riding of Essex, you know, we have a new battery plant coming. We have the Gordie Howe Bridge, which will be, well, the Ambassador Bridge is already the busiest international border crossing in North America with huge amounts of trade. But I know that they're having a tough time with skilled trades, getting skilled trade workers there to complete these projects. Could you touch upon what Bill C-241, you know, how that may enhance getting more skilled trades to our area to build this infrastructure that's so desperately needed?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, MP Lewis. You know, one of the challenges now is our workers, construction workers, particularly unionized construction workers, are very mobile workforce. Like close to your area now in Sarnia, there's a big project in Sarnia, and there's electricians there, boilermakers from all over the country. They're in Sarnia. Fort McMurray, during shutdowns, construction workers travel all across the country. For these big projects, oftentimes there's a living out allowance included, and so there's an incentive for workers to go. But oftentimes there's not living out allowances, and so you'll have areas where you have high unemployment, and maybe 300 kilometers down the road you have excess demand. There's not enough workers available to do the work, and there's a disincentive for workers to travel because they're going to have to pay that travel cost, accommodation cost, lunch costs out of their own pocket, they're not going to make that journey. So if you provide this tax deduction in the budget implementation bill and or any other initiatives, that'll provide incentives to go for workers to go to where the work is and help balance labor markets in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. My final 35 seconds, Mr. Chair, if I may, please. Very quickly, Mr. Strickland, could you talk about temporary foreign workers and the impact that Bill C-241 perhaps might help them with as well?
Well, any kind of incentive that's going to provide tax relief to workers to travel, in theory, should reduce the reliance on temporary foreign workers. But the temporary foreign worker problem is a much larger issue for Canada and for the Canadian economy. It's not only in the construction industry, it's across agriculture, fisheries, and other areas as well. And so we need a really holistic approach to improving our labor market availability across all kinds of sectors in Canada and look at ways to reduce reliance on temporary foreign workers. But since the temporary foreign worker program exists, there's many things we need to do to change the temporary foreign worker program to make it more reflective, I think, of our Canadian values and protect workers from exploitation when they come from places outside of Canada to work here.
MP Lewis at the time, and now we'll move to the Liberals for questions. MP Zerowitz for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the interviewers, all the presenters today for their excellent presentations. I'm going to start off with questions to Mr. Hinton, and then I'll end off with Mr. Strickland. Mr. Hinton, thank you for your very thoughtful presentation. You gave an urgent call to our government around the importance of IP, as well as an urgent call to action that we need to create the rules around the freedom to operate. Just for those who might not understand, what do you mean by the freedom to operate? And if you could just explain it maybe in 1 minute, like 30 seconds or less, and then what would be the top 2 or 3 things we need to do that would actually create that environment of freedom to operate for our businesses?
Yes, thank you. And so, freedom to operate is really what businesses in the innovation economy have to deal with. And so IP is a negative right. And so patent allows you to prevent others from making, using, or selling. And so really, it's not so much about sort of protecting what you've come up with, sort of protect your invention. That's what IP does. But it also, you're building on the IP positions of other players. And so if the foundation is owned or the land is owned by these big major players, then ultimately your freedom to operate is reduced. And so it's your ability to go out and commercialize your technology, recognizing that most IP, 90% of patents that are granted are improvements over other people's positions. And so because you don't own that underlying position, you don't have the freedom to operate. And so like 99% of the IP is already owned by some other players. You have to manage that IP and reduce the risks that come with it. And so that's your freedom to operate. And it's really the lens that all policy in the innovation economy needs to take. Will this increase the freedom to operate of Canadian companies while also decreasing the freedom to operate of other global players?
So our federal government has made a clear commitment around a national IP strategy. What would be your immediate recommendation that we do that will actually help to create this freedom to operate for businesses here in Canada?
Yeah, so the immediate thing would be to scale the Innovation Asset Collective. And so it's a pilot project. It's in its last year now. And really what we need to do is be with our global peers and have that fully funded. Right now it's data-driven clean tech companies, a very important sector, but it's well underfunded, and we need to expand that across all sectors, and provincial and federal governments need to work together to most effectively sort of not ratchet that up based on the innovation spending. We should be spending significantly more to protect the IP that we generate than we already are, and ensure that benefits economically benefits Canada and Canadian companies.
Okay, so the Innovation Asset Collective, I think you said it was IAC, and I think it's a $30 million pilot, if I recall correctly. So you think we need to scale that up. Would you give us a sum of money that you think would be an appropriate amount of funding in order to scale this up?
Yeah, and so I looked to global peers and what are other countries doing? And so the Chinese, the Americans, they really have funded significantly their IP generation capacity. We can't do that. We need to be more shrewd. And so looking to other countries like France, Korea, Japan, what are they doing? Small open economies. And as I mentioned, the French France Brevet, the French fund, they started with 500 million euros, and they've since gotten another 500 million euros. And so that's a significantly an order of magnitude or two more than what where Canada sits today with its funding. So we really need to be keeping pace with those global peers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hinton. And because I've just run out of time with you, if you could submit some of your key recommendations on how we create this freedom to operate beyond sort of the investment that you have, or the scale up of the $30 million clean tech pilot, I'd be grateful. Then this committee can actually consider your recommendations moving forward. Turning to Mr. Strickland. Mr. Strickland, I want to say thank you for being here today. And I also want to say a huge thanks to you for your leadership around the labor mobility deduction for tradespeople, and also really pushing our government to increase funding around union training and innovation. It's made an impact, and as you could see, it is in Budget 2022. We've talked a lot about labor mobility, not labor mobility, we've talked a lot about labor shortages in Canada. We do have, over the years, because our immigration system hasn't facilitated tradespeople coming into this country, we've developed or acquired a number of non-status trades workers that are working within the construction sector. Would you agree, do you think that we need to normalize or find some sort of pathway to citizenship for those trades workers who've been working in our industry, who've been trained up, who've been largely socially and economically integrated? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, thank you, Pete Dershowitz. Absolutely. Sorry, I sound like there's feedback there. Undocumented workers is certainly a challenge for industry, and there are numerous undocumented workers across Canada who are going to work every day, and I think to find a path to citizenship for those folks and bring them into the legitimate Canadian economy is a good initiative. And I know there's been some work done with the Canadian Labour Congress previously, and we've had some conversations, and there's some pilot projects underway. So that's one thing that needs to happen. Another thing that needs to happen, we're talking about immigration, is that we're beginning to advocate for a construction immigration pilot program. As you mentioned, MP Dershowitz, it's very hard for construction worker to get into Canada right now under the current immigration guidelines. And we need construction workers. In Ontario alone, conservative investments we need 25,000 workers right now. We have similar challenges in British Columbia, challenges on the horizon in Alberta. And so we need to find a way to return to some of the initiatives of the 50s and 60s when we brought in large multitudes of construction workers to build the infrastructure of the day, which we now need to be replaced. So there's a variety of initiatives that need to take place to improve labor availability in the construction industry, and immigration is a big piece of that.
Thank you so much.
Derowitz, now we'll hear from the Bloc, MP Sainte-Marie, for 6 minutes, please.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question for Mr. McDonald of Imagine Canada, and then for Mr. Rook of Cider Canada. But I would like to thank all witnesses first for being here and for their excellent presentations, which are truly interesting. I really appreciated that made by Mr. Cochrane. So for Mr. McDonald, as most of my colleagues have, we have been able to meet your organization to discuss in depth the issues related to C-19. I understand that you prefer S-216, which met the needs of the organizations that you represent, at least a little better. My first question, according to you, what will the repercussions of C-19 be on groups that are equity-seeking and that wish to work with charities? Unfortunately, Mr. Sainte-Marie, the simultaneous translation didn't work for your question, so I missed most of your question. Is there another way that you could put the question? I don't understand why I didn't hear it. So, Mr. Chair, is it possible to tell Mr. McDonald how to use the interpretation service? Well, I did use it, but unfortunately, I'm not hearing anything. Je n'entendais pas la...
Est-ce qu'on m'entend bien?
All right, if I start again, can we hear me? Seems that the English and French...
And I'm not getting anything.
Et moi, je n'entends rien du tout, et je l'ai allumé, j'ai essayé des deux côtés.
French interpretation. I'm on the English channel.
Bon, et si je recommence à...
And if I start speaking again, Mr. McDonald, you can't hear me now? No, unfortunately, I cannot hear you.
Yeah,
So, Chair, could the technicians look into this?
is it Mr. McDonald? Can you hear now?
No.
Monsieur Samari, can you speak en
Oui,
français?
donc je vais...
Yes, of course. So I will continue speaking in French just to see whether our technicians can fix this in short order. If that's not possible, I could return a little later, and during the interim, perhaps technical services can solve the problem.
To get the interpretation for that?
No.
And no, on the bottom of your screen, you have selected the English on the bottom of your screen?
Yes.
You have? Okay.
Yes.
We'll ask the other witnesses. Are the other witnesses hearing the interpretation?
Est-ce que les autres témoins...
Are other witnesses able to hear the interpretation into English when I speak in French? Mr. Cochrane seems to be saying no. Unfortunately, I can't answer that. I understand. Which is why, of course, it's important to have the interpretation if you can't give me the answer in French. So perhaps, Chair, we could circle around to me again.
A minute, just to see if we could fix this. Thank you.
OK, merci.
Floor is
semble
yours,
fonctionner.
MP
Donc, Monsieur
Samari.
le Président, je comprends que j'ai
So, Chair, I understand that I have a right to my full 6 minutes. Is this what you were saying?
When we pause, so you've got a good 4 minutes, but the little leeway.
Ah, bon.
Yeah.
Très bien.
Ah, I see. Very good. I see that Mr. Blakey has his hand up.
Juste pour dire, Monsieur le Président,
Just to say, Mr. Chair, that given that we can take it that the interpretation was not working for the witness throughout the entire time of Mr. St. Marie's, just until we took a break, I think it would be reasonable to allow him his full 6 minutes, just to ensure that everyone is fully able to understand what he was actually saying during the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I didn't realize, was it for the full 2 minutes? I didn't realize, okay, I did not realize that it was not working for the full 2 minutes. MP Samari?
Bon, mais
6
merci
minutes.
beaucoup, Daniel. Donc,
Thank you very much. So, starting at the top, I would like to thank all the witnesses for being here. Their presentations have been highly interesting. My first question for Mr. MacDonald. Mr. MacDonald, what we understand from your presentation is that C-19 is insufficient, and what you request is what's in Bill S-216. First question, what would the repercussions of C-19 for equity-seeking groups trying to work with charitable organizations?
Merci pour votre patience
Thank you for your patience.
in English. Yeah, it's really important as we are sort of on the cusp of how Canada is changing to be able to evolve with that. As we seek to address long-term issues of truth and reconciliation, systemic inequities, many of the organizations that are serving those communities are in fact non-qualified donees. And so it is essential that the language of Bill of C-19 is amended to enable these organizations to engage with charitable organizations so that they can create innovative, unique solutions, not while reducing accountability, to be able to provide service to those groups, their stakeholders, their constituents, and be able to ensure that we're moving forward as a nation.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You suggested as well some amendments that the committee might make, and I'm sure we'll be debating them here among committee members. So I just wanted to let you know that. Next question. You refer to a shared platform. What exactly is that? And how would changes to C-19, to the BIA, how would it change that type of partnership?
Question. Like the term shared platform is commonly used to describe a situation where an organization hosts and provides a legal home or for a project or initiative that's unincorporated and doesn't have on its own legal status. It's kind of like an incubator, thinking about startups in the social impact world. What we're seeking is to ensure that those organizations can participate in a way that is appropriate for them. I mean, part of what we're really looking for here is to say there needs to be elements of context and reasonableness built into the system, because this one-size-fits-all doesn't work for these types of operations.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Thank you for that answer. What I understand from reading C-19 and comparing it to Bill S-216 is that the finance minister officials, or more generally the department, let's say, seem to be concerned about the S-216 aim to ensure that funding doesn't go to other aims, not charitable aims. So do you think that bad actors might be using charitable funds for non-charitable uses? And the prescriptive nature of the regulations, of course, seem to be lifted from American legislation. So do you think the American approach is the best way to handle this issue?
I mean, the short answer The short answer is no. I mean, if we take a look at the U.S. system, and I mean, it's so different from what's here in Canada. I mean, there's fundamental issues. First, it doesn't really fit. I mean, our system has been based on common law premise that's more general than the U.S. Internal Revenue Code rules, which are more black and white. So by importing one small section from the complex U.S. tax regime, we're mixing systems with unsatisfactory results. The second challenge is that the U.S. system is incredibly prescriptive. Even the current CRA guidance format allows the charity to figure out the best accountability instrument. Essentially, what's happening is that this prescriptive approach takes out the context. It's trying to say every charitable partnership needs to look the same, and that's not the way it works on the ground. We need a system that allows charities, non-qualified donees, and yes, CRA to work together to find good demonstrations of accountability.
OK, merci beaucoup.
All right, thanks. Perhaps a last question of a slightly more sensitive nature. Over recent years, the Parliament, the Government of Canada, has dealt with the We Charity issue. Now, in the legislation here, the amendments offered, would anything here allow for that sort of thing to happen again?
Well, I mean, I think that is an entirely unique and different situation. I think what's important to stress here, and I will just say this over and over again, different accountability does not mean less accountability. Organizations will still be required to demonstrate that the partnerships with non-qualified donees further the charitable purpose. Documentation will still be required. Financial accountability will still be in place. What we're asking for is, again, this idea of context, reasonableness, and the uniqueness of each relationship to be reflected in the system in which it operates.
Vos réponses sont très claires, très convaincantes.
Very well, very clear, very convincing, and let's hope that your amendments will be seen favorably by the members of the committee. Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair?
Okay, merci.
Merci.
Thank you.
And then we'll hear from the NDP for questions. MP Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thanks to all our witnesses for appearing here today. Mr. Strickland, I just wanted to start, first of all, by congratulating the Canadian Building Trades for getting the Building Trades tax proposal over the finish line. I know it's something that the Building Trades have worked with a lot of my NDP colleagues on over the years, and of course members from other parties as well. And so congratulations to you on that. And I just wondered if you had any comment on the specific wording of the Budget Implementation Act, anything that you think needs to change in the wording. My impression is that it's a pretty decent representation of what you've asked for, but just wanted to give you a quick opportunity for some reflections there.
Well, thank you very much, MP Blakely, and indeed thank you to your party for your support over the years. Our view on this, and I've looked at some of the language. We haven't had a detailed examination of all of the language. I'd be happy to take the opportunity to do that and provide you with some more feedback and provide that through to the committee chair. Our view is that we have worked on this for such a long period of time, and the need is quite immediate, that we would like to get something into place as soon as we possibly can. There's nothing in the wording that I reviewed somewhat superficially, but that would cause us any amount of concern. I would say that it might be a little bit confusing for the trades worker because the wording is 150 kilometers closer to their place of work from their residence. And it took me and the team a little while to try to figure out exactly what that meant and had to draw some maps. And so, you know, when it comes to the income tax and Canadians filing their income tax, transparency and simplicity is always the best. And if we're having a hard time trying to interpret exactly what it means, I think there might be some room for clarity and maybe some interpretation briefs related to that to help our workers. Because as I understand it, you can put the implementation is effective once it's passed for this calendar year. So we're going to be asking our workers and all construction workers to start keeping their receipts so they can claim the tax deduction. But we want to make sure that we're communicating then clearly what the guidelines are, and I think there's some room for improvement around that, MP Blakey.
Thank you very much. I want to go next to Mr. McDonald. I think you mentioned in your opening remarks that you did have some amendment language that you weren't going to read into the record, but I wonder if you might be able to provide that to the committee in writing after the meeting, just so that it's part of our record of testimony as part of the study of the bill. And if you wanted to provide some quick remarks, or perhaps a little note in your written follow-up on how you envision the accountability mechanisms working under your proposal, and what exactly that would mean, and how Canadians might expect that accountability will continue to be a part of the system despite allowing for some improved flexibility.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to do so.
Thank you very much. That's very much appreciated. I wanted to go next to Mr. Cochrane. I know you had said that you had hoped for the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the housing measures that are contained in the Budget Implementation Act, and I just wanted to make sure you got some time to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to comment on that. Our main concerns with all of the speculative housing measures have to do with how it is targeted. So we think that taking steps towards reducing the treatment of housing as an asset first and a home second are very welcome. We just don't think there's any reason to limit who is excluded from that activity to non-Canadians. To us, we think it risks fostering xenophobic attitudes towards immigrants and other people who are perceived as being non-Canadians. And frankly, most of the speculative activity that is affecting housing prices is going to be coming from within Canada. So we think that all measures that are addressed at speculation should not be limited in that way.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking to the chair for a little guidance on time.
About a minute.
About a minute?
Yes.
Okay, great. I guess I wanted to ask you as well, in terms of some of the other measures that were announced in the budget to try and increase the amount of money that Canadians, can save to acquire a home, for instance. I'm just wondering how you think those types of measures that might help Canadians save up for a down payment, for instance, how those cash out in the current market if there isn't any action taken to try and reduce the force of speculation and driving up housing prices. It seems to me, but I'll defer to you as the expert, that if you put more money in the hands of Canadians right now to buy a house, that just ends up increasing the max bid, and we're not breaking the pattern that's been pushing up housing prices. We're just kind of allowing Canadians to maybe get a little bit of a competitive edge at a moment in time in a particular bid, but we're not addressing the kind of structural problems with the housing market.
Yeah, they absolutely risk being fuel on the fire. I get the instinct behind these measures. My concern is that they're rooted in an impulse to always try to, adhere to the market logic, let the market work the way that it wants to work. But where housing is at, we need to look to the side of how the market is pricing these things. So measures like encouraging savings to be able to buy a house, while they will benefit some individuals get access to the housing market, you're absolutely correct that they're just going to help propel housing prices up further. And speculators in anticipation of that, who already have access to plenty of capital and aren't being restricted as much as they need to be, are going to anticipate that and already be piling in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Blakey, members, witnesses. That's the end of our first round. Moving into our second round, we have the Conservatives up for 5 minutes. MP Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My questions will focus around the direction and control, and I'll be talking to Mr. McDonald for most of my questions. First of all, Mr. McDonald, I just want to start, I think some of the concerns with moving towards a more accountability-based, transparency-based, as opposed to micromanagement-based, might come from the government in concern that if, in fact, charities gift to non-qualified donees, that somehow this money might go to non-charitable purpose, or even worst case scenario, illicit purposes. But I know, because I've reviewed S216 and I've looked at the current legislation, that won't happen. But perhaps you could share with the committee the type of challenges that a charity would face, both reputational and legal risk, if in fact the amended legislation went through and one of the non-profit organizations or non-qualified organizations did something that was outside the charitable purposes.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because, again, it goes back to this idea that having different accountability is less accountability, and that's just simply not true. What we're looking to see is to say organizations who want to work with non-qualified donees must do so in furtherance of their charitable purpose. Both S216, the amendments that we're providing to the BIA, create a system where that takes place. There's not less documentation. There's not less accountability. What there is appropriate one, that's accountability measures that speak to the unique partnership and relationship set up with the non-qualified donee. And CRA would play its role in ensuring that those are observed. So, I mean, charities want to do their good work in furtherance of their charitable purpose. They're not looking to step outside. And what we're suggesting is a system that preserves both the ability to have innovative programming and have trust and confidence that the accountability measures are in place.
Very much. And maybe you could talk also just a little bit about the unintended or negative consequences on marginalized and racialized and vulnerable groups if this legislation goes through without any amendments. As I've certainly seen underneath direction and control, given the troubled history between the Canadian government and Indigenous peoples, the challenge that's because basically direction and control means that Canadian charity must take over an Indigenous nonprofit. Don't you think, or disagree if you feel, but with the prescriptive nature that we're going to repeat that error over again if we don't amend this legislation?
Well, actually, not just repeat, but in fact enhance it, because the direction and control provisions remain with the Budget Implementation Act. Own activities is not being changed in the Income Tax Act. So that's preserved. And in addition, there's this whole series of prescriptive measures. We are working in a different world where it requires charities to work with partners who are non-charities. As such, we need a system that allows this to happen because, in a sense, many of those organizations are the experts on the ground, providing the services, working with their charitable partner. And so it's critically important that the ability to do so is preserved.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last minute I'll use just to, if you could explain upon directed gifting. This is the reason why this exists is to prohibit a donor from perhaps directing a gift to help them specifically. But in this circumstance, it could have real challenges where a charitable wants to focus particular funds with respect to perhaps Ukraine or something like that they could be technically offside. Perhaps, and I know you will do it much more eloquently than I do, you could elaborate on that, Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is important that as charities start to do more and more of these relationships with non-qualified donees to serve vulnerable populations here or abroad, that they have the ability to have the financial strength to be able to do that. And what we want to ensure is that organizations are able to have dollars that go towards supporting that. And so you can see if a donor wanted to come and work with a charity to create a new innovative program on an Indigenous reserve, or they would want to be able to ensure that those dollars are going. And as long as they're in furtherance of the charitable purpose, we want to make sure that that can happen.
Thank you, MP Lawrence. And now we'll hear from MP McDonald. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the guests here today. And I know Mr. Strickland has left, Chair, but I do have some questions that I hope we can... Oh, is he still here?
Yeah. I think, is he going to clerk? Yep. Mr. Strickland? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
he's
still
Okay,
here.
oh,
It
still
is,
here.
I thought he left.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strickland, just there's millions of dollars transferred to the provinces each year for labor market development agencies in each of the provinces, and I'm just wondering, can you give me your opinion on some of the most effective programs that possibly work relevant to your industry?
Well, the Union Training and Innovation Program is a really good one that works quite well. There is, there was in the budget is doubled to $84 million. And so that's something that directly benefits 197 training centers right across Canada, and works quite well in terms of providing opportunities to improve not only the capital and the ability of the union training centers to put into place the right kind of equipment for modern construction techniques, but also provides an opportunity to outreach into the community and get more people in the construction trades. And so that's a really good program that works pretty well. There's also apprenticeship incentives that are available through various government initiatives and government programs that also provide some support for apprentices getting into the construction trades. EI has numerous programs, but an EI program itself needs some improvements which could better support construction workers and especially apprentices.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland, and the review of EI is ongoing, so interesting. But I'm just wondering if you could also just any suggestions on, because I come from Prince Edward Island and I think we're short about 600 to 1,000 construction workers on a small island of 160,000 people. So it's extreme. The temporary foreign worker program, we had initially created a Atlantic growth strategy that seemed to work very well, and they've adopted it permanently on Prince Edward Island, Atlantic Canada. But do you have any suggestions to improve the temporary foreign worker program? And, or if there was a possibility of a pilot for construction workers, at what scale would you suggest?
Well, absolutely, MP McDonald. That's a great question, and the Atlantic Pilot Project is something that we're looking at and is a possible path forward for a construction pilot project. And in Ontario, like I don't really know what the number is. I know what the demand is based on having conversations with various construction industry executives and union leadership in Ontario. I mentioned earlier, 25,000 alone in Ontario could go to work today. You mentioned 6,000 in Prince Edward Island because you're going through a housing boom right now. Build Force Canada indicates that, in the next 10 years, we need well over 100,000 workers in Canada to meet the demand and also close the gap with retirements. And so what we need is, I think, is a construction immigration pilot project. I don't know what the right number is. I think we need to start it in a province where we have the greatest amount of demand right now. And we also have to make sure it's achievable. So, one number we're looking at is 10,000 construction workers for the province of Ontario. If you want to move more, pan-Canadian, that number would increase and would be reflective of the demand in the various provinces. But we need to get more this growing reliance on temporary foreign workers. Temporary foreign workers is not a long-term sustainable solution to our labor market demands in Canada. We also need to encourage more Canadians to get into the construction industry. And that's something that the government has also put some initiatives on the table in terms of apprenticeship services, sectoral initiatives. There's a lot of money coming to help our industry attract more people into the trades, and those are the kinds of things we need more of.
About 30 seconds.
Thank you. One thing you didn't mention, which we continue to raise, is trades being identified and exposed to students in K to 12 at some point, whether that be grade 7, 8, or 9, or 10, or 11, or 12. But it doesn't seem to be consistent across the country. Can you give me a quick comment on that, and if there's any initiations by your association to do this or make it awareness?
Answer, please.
Well, this is a real challenge, and you've probably all heard it before with your own communities. The shop classes of the 70s have all been closed down, and the learning models have changed, and so it's very difficult for high school students for a high school student in many jurisdictions in Canada to even get exposed to trades. Like where I live in Kitchener-Waterloo, there's only one high school that offers, the opportunity to take electrician or electricity courses. There's only one that offers sheet metal. And so if you're interested in that, you have to travel from all over the region to go to that school. So our unions and our unions in different communities and provincial associations are working hard to try to turn that around. But it's a big uphill fight.
Thank you.
We are seeing some initiatives at the provincial level as well to encourage that. So
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. And we're starting to lose you a little bit with your internet there. And you're right. Great careers in the trades. So we are now moving to Monsieur Sainte-Marie for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, life is always better when you live beside a lake, but unfortunately, out in the regions, connectivity is not always the best. My first question is for Mr. Rook of Cider Canada. I'm always so impressed by the quality of the products made by our cider experts. Over the last few years, what we're seeing is really incredible in Canada. My last discovery has the Kisem Récolte at Saint-Jean-de-Matin cider producers. It's really fantastic cider. You should be proud of all of this. So to understand the issue, in C19, there is a matter of excise tax to be brought back in from wine. This is a World Trade Organization decision based on a conflict with Australia. So this is raisin wine, grape wine, but in Ottawa, there's not necessarily a difference made between that, cider, and wine and honey wine. So this tax would apply to your members.
Wine, currently by the government, it's produced in sort of a similar fashion with fresh fruit as opposed to, say, beer, which is with barley and those other areas. So it is one of the areas that we are interested in exploring to work with the government to separate it out from wine, because it does have all of those different production structures and costs associated with it. And we think that will help to address the concerns that are brought up with the excise duty, but also that the entire challenges for taxation within alcohol at the federal level probably do need a review across the current three beer, spirits, and wine. And we think that an industry-led solution, something similar to the BTAP, which happened in BC in the past couple of years, might put Canadians into a better position to be both stronger economically for the organizations they run, but also be able to produce and experience that really good product that we make across the country.
Oui, c'est très clair. Merci beaucoup.
Yes, that's clear. Thank you. And I fully agree with your suggestion there. The Quebec legislation, in Quebec, there is a difference between wine, traditional wine, and other alcoholic beverages, including cider. So is this the sort of approach that Ottawa could adopt, besides overseeing the excise tax and alcohol taxes in general?
Buy cider individually or separate from wine. It is growing and has become such a large and has the potential to become a much larger industry overall. So I think that opportunity, we were talking around 2 to 4% of total alcohol consumed would be cider, and that number is growing. And to be able to develop its own needs and its own solutions within the tax structures and systems not only will, again, help the individual producer, but will help the Canadian consumer to be able to access that type of product.
And merci, MP
C'est très clair. Merci.
Clear, thank you.
And MP Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I wanted to return to Mr. Cochrane. We had the opportunity to talk a little bit about housing, but I know he had also mentioned climate action as being one of the areas that he had hoped to address in his testimony. So wanted to offer Mr. Cochrane the opportunity to talk a little bit about that issue in the context of the Budget Implementation Act.
Thank you very much. So our general comment with regard to climate action in budget 2022 is that there's nowhere near enough direct actual action with funding to achieve the types of economic transformations that we need. We're concerned that there's excess reliance on tax credits, and in this specific implementation bill, there's a reduction of the corporate income tax for zero emission technology manufacturers. We're always concerned anytime new complications are introduced into the tax code. Mr. Strickland already brought up the fact that the tax system works best when it's kept simpler. We're always concerned when something is introduced that's going to reduce the tax rate for some subsegment of the corporate community, because there's so much opportunity for gamesmanship around this. We're concerned that this puts an excessive burden onto the CRA to have to oversee what is actually qualifying as zero emission technologies. And then on the other side of things, if you're going to be reducing tax rates to try to encourage certain types of manufacturing, then let's have the balancing act of perhaps raising tax rates on the production of technologies that contribute to higher emissions. So we just think that this is very asymmetrical as being introduced, and is a lot of substitution of what looks like action for actual action.
Now, in the budget, there is about $2.5 or a little bit more billion announced for carbon capture and sequestration to encourage that practice. And we saw a reduction of a fossil fuel subsidy on flow-through shares that the government projects is going to be about $9 million worth of revenue it will see back. I don't know if you want to speak maybe to the orders of magnitude involved there and the difference between new fossil fuel subsidy spending versus what they're rolling back.
Yeah, we're very happy to see ending of the flow-through shares for investments in oil and gas companies. We take issue with the flow-through share structure more generally. It really only benefits the absolute elite of the investors and encourages investment in what are otherwise not profitable undertakings, and can encourage sort of money losing in ways that is destructive for the places where that investment is actually encouraging action. The carbon capture subsidy is also incredibly concerning. It strikes us as being a subsidy that will mostly benefit the oil and gas industry, which has already enjoyed decades and decades and decades of an effective subsidy by not charging for the emission of carbon. So we have an incredibly overdeveloped oil and gas sector, and we need to transition as quickly as we possibly can. And so we don't think that trying to encourage carbon capture technology that way is the way to achieve what needs to be achieved. We would much rather see direct investment in creating these technologies without it risking becoming effectively a new tax dodge by companies that frankly are experts at avoiding taxes.
Thank you. And that's the time, MP Blakey. And now moving to the Conservatives and MP Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our presenters today for your expertise and wanting to come and share what C19 means to some of the stakeholders out there. Or your individual opinion. So I'm going to start first with Mr. Rook. Mr. Rook, in my riding, we have wineries, or I should say we have wineries, absolutely. But we also have cideries like Left Field Cider Company just outside Logan Lake, Dominion Cider, Millionaires Row, Summerland Heritage Cider, Nomad Cider. That's only in Summerland and Logan Lake. There are others. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the trade challenge that has been the reason why the government says, well, we have to make these amendments to the Excise Act, especially to the sections on wine. So my understanding is Australia, the government completely capitulated to the Australians and didn't fight it in the WTO, and that's where we are. Unfortunately for you, because your industry is defined under the Excise Act as being under wine, you were thrown in there indiscriminately.
Yeah, we were, again, because of the classification, because cider has grown so quickly in the last 10 to 15 years, there was never that original thought that cider as under wine was separate. It is separate in most other countries because it is large enough to be separated out. We were under wine, and as a result, because of those challenges, it does mean that our sector has been caught up with this process. And just to add to it, our members are often not even aware of what excise duty is because of the process that they've started their companies, not even thinking that this was going to be an impact.
Now, I'd like to ask you about that because certainly there is a bottling deadline. So under the C19 page of the English 106, subsection 1 comes into force or is deemed to come into force on June 30th, 2022, but does not apply to wine packaged before that day. That also could mean cider. So are your members aware that anything that is bottled as of July 1st will be having this extra excise tax added to it?
It's been a challenge to get the word out because, again, very new, often very small organizations. So we're concerned that maybe half of the cider producers don't know that excise duty is coming into play, don't know that they have this new taxation that they're going to be charged starting July 1st, and don't know that if they have product that's waiting that could be bottled to save them that process, that they should be doing it. And there's also, of course, major challenges in glass, in transportation, in cardboard. There was a great study that just came out earlier today saying here in Ottawa, places are reusing glass options because what was available 1 week now takes up to 6 months to be able to get access to.
So if your industry was given another 3 to 6 months, that would be at least to be helpful for those that A, are unaware, but B, also for those that are having supply chain issues for glass, et cetera, for bottling.
That process would allow us to be able to get to a point where we could, if a producer's program is put into place when funds start to come back, that would reduce that gap and really help with cash flow and the hardship overall.
So I'm going to point something out to the government because government members don't always think about it in these terms, not these government members, but just the government itself. So we have most of our population is along the U.S. border. In Washington State, they can make large-scale operations they can dump a huge amount of product onto a market in terms of apples if they wanted to. All the companies I've listed here are proudly that they use Canadian products. They work with farmers locally to make sure there's less wastage. So by making these changes, the economies of scale are going to be so drastic. How many of your members do you think will have to start utilizing or may decide to start utilizing United States apples versus Canadian local product?
I wouldn't be able to give you a specific number, but I think what we've been talking about is if Canadian producers want to stick with Canadian products, those prices are raising so quickly and with so much competition for that they're not going to be able to be financially viable. And they're already very tight on margins, a lot tighter than beer and wine and spirits as a whole. So that might be an opportunity to switch. In some provinces, it's required to be all Canadian. Within the province. So, for example, Quebec, you can only use apples for that. So there's...
Yeah, last question to you. So obviously a bottle of wine sells usually for more than perhaps a bottle of cider. Is that correct?
Typically, it does, yes.
So these changes will impact cider more than wine. Is that correct?
That is correct. And when you add on the provincial taxation, it actually adds more to it because there's tax on tax.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you. And hopefully the government will come to its senses and be open to amendments.
Thank you, MP Albus. And now we'll hear from the Liberals, MP Chattel, for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses here with us today. It's very interesting to hear what you have to say about the Budget Implementation Act, C-19. My first question is for Mr. Hinton. I was very interested to hear you speaking of the fact that much of our intellectual property, well, indeed, we don't have enough of it or protection of it. In Quebec, we have seen small and medium-sized enterprises innovating. And as soon as their innovation would become, commercially viable, take in money, they would get bought out by other companies, mostly American companies. Do you have any recommendations about how to keep our Canadian businesses in Canada and protect their IP?
Issue you raise in Quebec is one that we see across the country. A lot of the Canadian IP that's generated is offshored or being sold, and it's really because Canadian companies don't have freedom to operate. The underlying IP is already owned by those players that acquire them, and it happens across the sector. And so if you think about something like critical minerals and the whole electric vehicle value chain, what is success is Canadian companies owning critical IP across the entire value chain. And so what countries like the Americans and the Chinese do is they watch Canadian companies start to grow, and they say, okay, this is a company that's going to help reinforce our electric vehicle value chain. And so we will acquire that IP now for, let's say, 3-10 times its worth, because we know that if we have the whole value chain, that we can get those innovation returns. And so these companies are specifically being targeted. The U.S. Department of Energy, I believe, has a list of the critical IP holding companies, and then goes and shops around and buys these companies for more than they're worth today, recognizing that it's going to be of critical value for the entire electric vehicle, critical mineral continuum of valuable IP. And so it's not an open market. It's happening, and the Chinese and the Americans are best known for doing that.
Merci. C'est sûr qu'on n'est pas les États-Unis ni.
Yes, we are not the United States, and we are not China. But you mentioned earlier that small, open economies, similar to ours, let's say France and Korea, have also developed strategies that we might be able to adopt here. Could you tell us more about the suggestions? And I, too, would like to have them in writing. But briefly, what are their strategies?
What we see is that those companies really prioritize the IP generation and retention of valuable IP. And so right now, we're actually doing a lot of our innovation policy sort of the wrong way. We're doing sort of investing in that tangible economy, giving billions of dollars for manufacturing jobs, while the Americans get to hold all of the IP. And so it further perpetuates the problem. And so what these countries have done through what we had called initially sovereign patent funds, but now with the Innovation Asset Collective and Canada's Patent Collective, acquire and retain intellectual property for the benefit of Canadian companies. And so having a pool of intellectual property that Canadian companies can access to give that scale. There's no Canadian companies that are in the sort of top 100 patent owners. And without that, those 5,000-10,000 patent portfolios, we don't have the bench strength to be able to go toe-to-toe with those bigger players. And so the snowball starts to melt instead of get bigger.
Merci beaucoup. Et si, comme je l'ai dit,
that's quite a lot. And yes, follow up in writing, please. I've got a short minute left, so my next question goes to Mr. Cochrane. What I would like to know, we received and heard Mr. Brian Arnold as a witness here about the general anti-avoidance rules, and he had some very clear ideas for the committee about how we could improve the general anti-avoidance regulation to ensure that everyone would pay fairly. And I'm very interested in that, including people shopping around for best tax situations. So could you give us some of your advice?
As an economist, my area of expertise is less how this needs to be specifically designed. I actually respect your expertise in this area, Ms. Chattel, and Mr. Arnold is certainly an expert in this area. What I know as an economist is that GAR is incredibly out of date because the global economy has become so much more digital, and the ability to shift intangible assets just makes it so much easier to book profits in the most tax favorable center. So the need to update it is long overdue, and I would absolutely defer to Mr. Arnold on what that could actually look like.
Thank you, and merci, MP Chatel. Members, we're moving into
Thank you, MP Chatel.
the midway mark. But I will hold everybody kind of to their time here so that we'll get here. We'll end up finishing a little after 1. We're starting with the Conservatives and MP Fast for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. First question is to Mr. Rook. Thank you for mentioning Taves Estate Cidery in Abbotsford, BC. Now, Mr. Taves, Lorne Taves, actually has shared with me that this new excise tax on cidery products will be devastating for his business and basically guts his company's profits and will not allow him to get a payback on his capital investment. And he also mentioned the impact that carbon taxes have on his viability when American cideries don't have to pay such a tax. Are you aware of any effort by this government to actually implement a carbon border adjustment mechanism to offset this disadvantage that Canadian companies have, especially in the cidery space?
I can't say I have any knowledge of the topic or any of discussion around that at all.
Well, I can confirm that, in fact, there is no such adjustment mechanism in place. In other words, Canadians that pay a carbon tax are treated much less advantageously than the American companies are. My second question is to Mr. Hinton. Yours is one of the most sobering assessments this committee has ever heard about our lagging innovation performance in Canada. You listed a number of challenges. Actually, there was quite a long list of challenges that undermine our competitiveness, especially within the innovation space. Could you quickly go through that list again and then perhaps put special emphasis on 2 elements that I picked up? One is the patent box. The second is the $10 billion of university investments that the federal government makes that it really never gets a repayment for, because those companies that receive that support eventually become non-Canadian.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and there were, I think I counted 16 or more aspects of the budget, the bill that touch on innovation. And the 2 you point out, the patent box, it's something that's been implemented in other jurisdictions, but you can do it 99 ways wrong and maybe one way right. And so really, when implementing these type of policies, it's about tax competitiveness and how do we encourage Canadian companies to grow, scale, and stay here in Canada and not put them at disadvantage against their global peers. It's not about, patent box shouldn't be about attracting foreign direct investment or chasing jobs because that's in the 9% tangible strategy. And then when it comes to the other aspects, our current research funding really is significantly underperforming. And as I mentioned, Canadian universities, we fund billions of dollars for research and development. But fundamentally, Canadian universities are great at creating talent and basic research, but there's no incentive or strings attached to encourage economic development. And so in countries like Finland, there's 3. There's education, basic research, as well as economic return. And so universities have started to encroach and get money in the name of innovation, and innovation is invention plus commercialization, using that technology in the market. And so universities are not actors of innovation. Those are Canadian firms, those are global firms. And what we see today is that more than half of all of the industry partnerships that happen and the resulting IP ends up with foreign companies, the likes of Huawei and Google, as I mentioned.
So how do we protect that investment that Canadian taxpayers make in our universities? Like, what is the mechanism we would use to make sure that those companies either stay Canadian or that we recover the investment plus perhaps a return on that investment going forward?
Yeah, and we've seen initiatives across the country, Quebec with Axelis, Ontario with IP Ontario, BC, Alberta are looking at this issue and starting to take action on this issue because they're the other half of the public funders for these. But what we need to do is ensure the proper stewardship of intellectual property for the benefit of Canadian companies. And so right now, it's as in the academic space, you have to publish. And so if you publish without protecting, that's innovation philanthropy. And so you're effectively giving away this technology to anybody who can capture it. And so at least ensuring there's proper stewardship of this IP, prioritizing Canadian companies and making sure Canadian companies are the ones that get the outputs of this investment, and deprioritize doing those deals with Fujitsu and all these other players that really don't need the help from Canadian taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Hinton. MP Fast. And now we're moving to the Liberals. MP Baker. Floor is yours for questions.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I'm going to start. My first question is to Mr. Cochrane. Mr. Cochrane, I wanted to go back to the beneficial ownership registry, if I could. And I know that this is something that your team has been advocating for. Can you talk a little bit, like keeping in mind that my constituents in Etobicoke Centre are watching this, how would you convey to them why a beneficial ownership registry is important?
So our organization was part of putting out a recent report on snow washing, which is the use of Canada's reputation as a country with solid rule of law, financially stable, a relatively robust tax system, but because of the anonymity that's available with business registries, allows people to hide their money, flow it through Canada, and then it acquires the reputation of effectively having been sanctioned by Canada. And so Canada is now part of the international network of tax havens, which I don't think is how Canada wants to function as part of the global economy. And the system of international tax havens is billions of dollars, trillions of dollars that does not get taxed, is connected to illegal activity, is connected to terrorism. And so eliminating the ability of people to hide behind the businesses that get established as part of their ownership networks is a way of combating the role of Canada within that network.
That makes a lot of sense. And could this also be impacting housing prices in Canada?
Yes, absolutely. Because so while we're targeting foreign owners, it wouldn't be too difficult to appear to be a Canadian owner if you're buying this asset via a Canadian ownership vehicle.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying basically is a beneficial ownership registry really allows us to better understand who's investing in Canada, particularly when it comes to assets like real estate, and therefore allows us to make sure that those who are investing are following the rules that apply to them if they're investing from abroad. And I guess it allows us to also make sure that do a better job of tracking how the funds are flowing and perhaps whether it's being used for criminal purposes. Is that a fair summary of your?
That's absolutely a fair summary. And obviously our organization's main concern is the role of anonymity and the role of these corporate registries to be able to avoid taxes. And so by knowing who the actual beneficial ownership is, it will empower the CRA to make sure that all of the taxes that should be paid to Canada are being paid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Of concern to, I think, all of us on this committee and all MPs is what's happened is Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine and its global implications. Can you talk a little bit about why, in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this type of registry might be even more important?
Yeah, so the government was wanting to sanction oligarchs who are connected to the Putin regime to make sure that they're not able to flee from their culpability, to make sure that they're not able to do business in Canada in a way that is ultimately serving the Russian war machine, for lack of a better term. But that's almost impossible because of their ability to hide via layers of ownership, so that you can't actually identify necessarily what assets are owned by these oligarchs.
I appreciate that. And I only have about 50 seconds left, I think, and the chair will correct me if I'm wrong. So in that 50 seconds, could you just share, help folks understand, help people who are watching at home understand, so why people are able to not be transparent about what they own or who owns these assets? Like, how is that? Why is that so concealed?
Because companies can own companies. And so you can have one company that's owning another company in another country that's owning another company in another country. And so the ability to track where assets are actually owned, who they're owned by, becomes incredibly opaque because you're having to deal with the different legal systems in each of these countries. And so Canada introducing a beneficial ownership registry, it's obviously not going to solve the global problem, but it will be a huge step forward and give Canada, the basis to then push others to do the same.
Thank
Fair
you.
enough. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cochrane, MP Baker. And moving to the block, and Monsieur Saint-Marie for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci. Donc, on assiste à des échanges.
Yes, thank you. This is such an interesting conversation here today. I would like to go back to Mr. Rook, Cider Canada. Picking up on your conversation with Mr. Albas, if I understood that correctly, provinces, some of them at least, allow for apple juice to be imported to make cider, and the excise tax would apply to the producer whether they use the Canadian apples or American apple juice.
That, but my understanding is that the cost of where the excise duty is borne at the time of when the fruit is converted into the alcohol process. So if you're purchasing apples from abroad or whatnot, you still have to pay the tax, the duty portion, when it converts from the juice to the actual product. That's at what point the excise becomes applicable. But if the apples are a lot cheaper, or the juice that comes in with the information along with it allows that process to happen, then that might be a way that some producers are looking at going.
Bon, dans l'esprit de soutenir une industrie en pleine ébullition avec.
All right, then hoping to support this growing sector with so many local producers, I think it would be important to have the government review this legislation, to ensure that we don't do no harm. Now, in your presentation, Mr. Brook, you mentioned negative effects on the sector if the excise tax goes ahead in C19. Could you just remind us again of the negative consequences that would have?
Really seeing are, again, based around the ability for an organization to continue to operate and produce product because the margins are so small already. And these are, again, small farmers who add this as an opportunity to use apples that they have on their lands, small businesses to medium businesses to large businesses that support the Canadian restaurants and orchards and so on. So with apples being such a huge impact and the largest essentially fruit producers in the country, this has a large potential to be quite impactful on not just cider producers, but the rest of the surrounding economies as well.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
And now to the NDP and MP Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Hinton, one of the lessons I drew from my time on the International Trade Committee in the last Parliament was that, Canada is not alone in emphasizing free trade in global marketplaces and reducing barriers, access barriers in trade agreements. But where we do stand out is that our governments under both stripes have also tended to then believe that part of that free trade ethos means a really laissez-faire attitude to industry at home. But in fact, our international competitors don't take that same view. They're equally aggressive in trying to reduce barriers to market access for their industrial players, but they're much better at actually working with them to have strategies for how to take that paper access to markets and then turn that into real market access for companies, including having an idea of what kind of work they want to protect for their domestic markets and how they want to drive job creation in their own domestic market as a result of access to international markets. And it's something that we heard a lot of different industries talk about. I wonder if what you think about that as a general assessment, and whether you see that as being at play in the industry in which you have a very particular expertise.
Yeah, and so international trade agreements are used by the stronger power countries like the Americans to permeate rules that benefit their domestic industries. And so we see that with the copyright extension that's mentioned in this act. It's all about the California and other content creators, and so that we agreed to under USMCA. So really, it's not about free trade. These are made up. Intellectual property is all made up. Patents, trademarks, copyrights. None of those things exist without somebody saying we need to give somebody some proprietary rights over it. And so the finger is on the scales entirely in the U.S. And other jurisdictions. The head of the U.S. Patent Office influences significant amount of the policy, and really that policy is designed to benefit domestic companies. And so we don't really have that. We don't recognize it. Historically, our innovation policy is based off inputs from foreign technology companies themselves, and then our domestic oligopolies, banks, insurance companies, and telcos, none of which drive global economic prosperity back to Canada. And so we need to be working closely with Canadian innovators, say, how do we increase your freedom to operate in global markets and decrease the freedom to operate of your competitors for that economic prosperity?
I think we saw some of that in the pandemic where
MP Blakey, thank you. I know it goes fast. Now we've got MP Chambers up for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all of our witnesses for coming today. A pleasure to have you here. I'm glad we could get to some of our witness hearings. Mr. Cochrane, wanted just to touch base back on where my colleague, Mr. Baker, left off with respect to the beneficial registry. As we understand, the registry that the government is introducing will not be searchable, at least not at the beginning. It has intended to make it searchable, but can you talk about how important it would be to have that registry to be publicly available, free and accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an absolute need. It must be publicly accessible, and searchability is just the basic function of making something like that useful. This will enable not just government institutions, but all sorts of entities to make use of it. One of the things that we and our partners really emphasize is that this will actually be a big benefit to business as well, because it will allow them to do a lot of the due diligence that can often be really, really onerous, to make sure that they're not doing business with bad actors and unwittingly finding themselves sort of in bed with them. It will allow journalists to undertake investigations to identify who the actual owners are behind assets. So it will really just superpower the registry to make sure it's most effective to do all the things that we believe it's capable of doing.
Thank you very much for that answer. Full agreement from certainly from myself and members of our party for the importance for it to be publicly available and accessible. You mentioned the work of journalists. And I thought maybe we'd take the moment here to talk a bit about the Panama Papers. Canada has not been successful in seeking or convicting or laying any criminal charges against any individuals listed in the Panama Papers. It's one thing to uncover nefarious acts or potentially acts that are illegal, and another to prosecute and convict. Are you concerned with our track record on that front?
Absolutely. And it points to a multitude of likely issues that are preventing the CRA from moving ahead with charges when the evidence, for those of us who aren't necessarily experts in all the legal ins and outs, but the evidence seems overwhelming that someone has done something that deserves to, face the law. So what exactly is preventing this? We can't pinpoint it. The recent coverage about sweetheart deals that are being reached between some high-level officials and the people that they're supposed to be responsible for overseeing, that might be a factor in this. So yeah, it's incredibly concerning. And frankly, it makes Canada look pretty bad when so many of our allies have been able to do something about the information in these leaks.
Thank you. Yes, I've often said that if you just looked at conviction statistics and investigations, you think that the Canadians are some of the most law-abiding people on earth and that there are no bad actors here. I know I'd say, at least in Simcoe North, my constituents are incredibly honest and trustworthy, but I find it hard to believe that in our country that we do have such a low conviction rate in investigations. You mentioned some sweetheart deals. My colleague, Mr. Stewart, put forward a motion to the Finance Committee a couple weeks ago. We have not yet had a chance to discuss that motion, where we are looking at the transaction or perhaps the forgiveness given by CRA to a large taxpayer. Is that a motion that you're aware of, and would you support additional information being made public?
I'm embarrassed to admit I'm not aware of it. It got past us. We're definitely interested in seeing what has been suggested, and I'm always in favor of more information. More information rarely is a bad thing.
Okay, thank you. And so just for your benefit, it's a motion with respect to the decision on advanced pricing arrangements within the CRA. So, hopefully we'll have some of that information brought forward to this committee, and we would appreciate your feedback on that. Mr. Chair, I think I probably have maybe 20 seconds left. Since we are over time, I'll yield that back to yourself.
Thank you, MP Chambers. And so we'll move to the Liberals. This will be our last questioner, MP Zarowitz, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to go back to Mr. Hinton and maybe continue on some of the questioning that Mr. Fastad had asked. You, in response to the question around the investment that we provide to universities in terms of research, and you had indicated in one of your responses that there were no strings attached to encourage innovation. Can you maybe make a recommendation about what is it that we could do at the federal level that would actually encourage innovation and patent protection? I know that you had talked about that a number of different provinces already have a number of bodies that are starting to work on this, but what can we do federally to help support this?
Yeah, and so what we need to do federally is really mirror some of the activities that's already happening in the IP Ontario expert panel on intellectual property released a report, and as part of that, detailed action items and is now putting resourcing together. And so the universities are, generally speaking, under-resourced, and so they need to be properly resourced and supported to be able to reorient on this. But fundamentally, universities are not the center of where innovation happens, and so we need to say, okay, what is important for Canadian companies, Canadian SMEs, and their IP and research needs, and ensuring that Canadian universities can support those needs, and not say, how can we make universities better performing when it comes to innovation? Rather, how can Canadian companies be stronger by using and working with Canada's universities and research institutions, colleges across the board? And so putting the Canadian SME at the center of that, and then having those organizations support those companies.
Thanks for that. We often hear that businesses aren't making the investments in innovation that they should be. And in your opinion, do you feel that that is because we don't have the freedom to operate as you indicate?
Yeah, that's right. You're not going to invest in a line of business or a new business where the foundational IP is owned by your competitors, because it's you don't have the freedom to operate. And so our domestic companies that are purely domestic don't have very good IP positions, and they need to work hard to be able to sort of keep their, let's say, more provincial and domestic shuffling of economic returns. But it's not that global economic opportunity that we really need to see.
So how do we help build that? There seems to be a lack of capacity, and I'm not sure whether we say expertise, whether it's understanding or engaging in the innovation economy at the government level, at the business level, at the university level. How do we improve that at each of those levels?
Yeah, and so foundationally, it's IP education, and we're doing that with the Innovation Asset Collective. I'm doing that this Friday. You can join my Western class on commercializing innovation. But it's really about getting Canadian SMEs to be more savvy around IP. But then fundamentally giving resources like here we see in the budget, the Can Export program, fantastic, through the Trade Commissioner Service, giving resources to Canadian companies to protect their intellectual property globally. But then again, without that underlying freedom to operate, and so resourcing properly things like the Patent Collective, so we have this, that freedom to operate, or improve the freedom to operate for key economic sectors for Canada.
Okay, and how much time do I have left? I have 1 minute. Is Mr. Strickland still with us? Or has he left us? He has left us.
He's having connection problems.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So maybe I'll leave. I will. Maybe Mr. Hinton, if you have, I have 1 minute left. If you have anything else that you think that you would like to maybe advise the committee or make a recommendation to the committee, the floor is yours.
Yeah, one key thing would be to start getting away from this FDI fallacy. There's jobs there, but that's not economic prosperity. And as we had discussions around the trades, there's not even enough people to go around for these jobs. And so stop investing in a job strategy. That's the 9% tangible economy, and start investing in the intangible economy. And so electric parts, electric vehicle parts manufacturing, battery manufacturing, we saw a lot of recent investment. But the IP and data that is going to be held by American companies, and we're participating, but we're not getting the lion's share of the value. And so I worked in heavy truck manufacturing before getting into IP. The jobs will be gone when the subsidies go. And the things that retain economic value is intellectual property, it's data, it's those intangible assets. And that's what we need to be growing, not participating in somebody else's manufacturing facility. It's the ones that own the IP and data, and manufacturing, just like any other, is dominated by IP and data.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, MP Dzierwitz, and thank you to our excellent witnesses. Thank you for your remarks, the many answers to the many questions from members. We really appreciate it in informing Bill C-19. And on behalf of the members of the clerk, the analysts, everybody here that helps with this production, thank you very much to all our witnesses for joining us. Members, shall we adjourn?
Thanks for the opportunity.